Got to get ready to duck under the desk here. Are you ready for the earthquake? I'm gonna just make my own, if it's okay, little recording of this, because what I'm sharing, do you remember Brian Evenson? Do you remember the story we read about the AI, kind of the robot? Of course, right? You remember that? And I had you write kind of your own version, like your own style. And I mentioned that Brian Evenson was the chair of Brown University when I was studying there. I just told the story, if you came in, right, about the earthquakes and coming back to Japan in 2011. Until 2010, I was at Brown for 2 years with Brian Evenson was my advisor for fiction. And we've been doing a lot of poetry and kind of like experimental things. And so I want to go back to just like basic sort of like prose writing and telling stories today, okay? And so actually this is, I don't want to say tamatama, like, by chance in a way. We had an exchange. I'm still in touch with him from time to time, like on social media kind of thing. And of course, he's still publishing fiction and doing many things. And these, we read his fiction. This is his nonfiction. He calls them reports. And they're really short, like a couple pages kind of thing. So they're perfect for this class, huh? And they're perfect for like writing, like shorts. So I wanted to share some, and actually he said to me, feel free to share these with your students or use them however you like. And then after I read them, because I like them so much actually, they're very funny. I think you'll enjoy these. I said to him, we had done a Zoom a talk, because I had taught one of his short story collections in a regular fiction class, not a writing class. I teach fiction too, right? And so we had done like an interview on Zoom. We had talked about his writing and we had talked about the collection. And so I said to him, do you want to do another Zoom talk about the reports? Because these are more recent. Actually, this was published several years ago, Reports 1, and then he did a second collection. And he had done an interview with someone that I listened to, and then we were talking about these. So, sorry for the long introduction. This is Brian Evenson, the guy who wrote that story about the robot or the AI machine kind of thing. Never Little, Never Grown. And so these are also same author, but very different style. And I want you to see how different, same author. These are nonfiction, and this is a totally different style. So I'm just going to read some of these to you. Let's start with the very first one. Should we? Actually, no, because it's kind of personal in a way. I mean, these are, any of them are okay, but let's start with this. A report on lunch. This is perfect because we're going to go to lunch after our earthquake drill, right? Because we're like period, 2? And we always have lunch after, but we have, special earthquake drill today. So after our earthquake drill, everyone's very hungry, everyone's very tired, and we're going to be out in the field, and you're all going to be like, I want to eat lunch. So let's read about Brian Evenson's report on lunch. Are you ready? It was 12 o'clock, or noon, right? Otherwise known as noon. That's what he says. Kay and I had people coming over to meet our baby at 1 o'clock p.m. So the idea was to have a quick lunch. We were going to have a sandwich. We had bread for a sandwich, but as it turned out, we didn't really have anything to put between the bread, except for another seedier kind of bread. I suggested we toast a slice of seedier bread and then put that between 2 slices of less seedy bread and call this a, quote, toast sandwich. You understand what he's doing here? This suggestion was met with silence. Then I suggested that we toast a slice of the less seedy bread and put it between 2 slices of seedier bread and call this, in a sort of marketing move to make us feel better about eating it, a dazzler. Woo. This suggestion was also met with silence. By now it was 12:15 p.m. Realizing that we were in danger of reaching a time when it would be impossible to have lunch at all before people arrived, and that we would, as a result, be forced to skip lunch, I took decisive action. I'll stop making the quote marks. I grabbed my keys, grabbed the baby, and drove to Chipotle. Do you know Chipotle? It's like a chain in America. It's a chain like McDonald's or Mospaga, but it's a kind of Mexican food, but it's like fast food, okay? So Chipotle, so he quickly goes to Chipotle. At Chipotle, I ordered some chips and a, quote, salad to go with lots of lettuce, black beans, fajitaed veggies. You know fajita, it's a kind of Mexican thing. There is probably a more correct term for this, and if I'm given it, I will employ it in future reports. Chicken, mild salsa, and corn salsa, sour cream, cheese, guacamole, and some extra lettuce on top to keep it from sticking to the lid of the container. So you understand, he's putting the lettuce in so it doesn't stick. Then I drove madly home, because they don't have time, where Kay and I split the so-called salad. We were nearly finished when people arrived. After they left, about an hour later, I ate the last few bites of salad, quote, and then threw the container away. This is my report on lunch. No one's smiling. I was laughing hysterically when I read this. There's a lot of irony here. Hiniku tteu ne. Okay? Nobody gets that? All right, well, we'll try another one. A report on a snack. So not very serious. In a way, they are just ironic, okay? We'll try a few more of these, huh? I was waiting in my office for the arrival of N, who travels periodically several thousand miles to interview me. This is part of her receiving her so-called qualification in her own country, the details of which she has explained to me, but the educational system is so different from our own that I do not feel I completely understand it, nor understand what it qualifies her to do exactly, nor do I understand why I am important to the process of qualification, though she has repeatedly promised me that I am. Nor do I understand why, if I, despite being a foreigner, am important to this process. More students from our country do not come seek me out, right? If I'm so important, why don't more students come to find me and ask me for their help? Okay. It had crossed my mind that she is lying to me about the qualification, that N may be visiting our country for other reasons entirely, reasons that she feels she must keep hidden from me. Indeed, she may be using me as an excuse to accomplish something else. But I decided finally to accept at face value her statement that she needs to interview me for her qualification. Usually N arrives, sets up her tape recorder, and we begin. This tape recorder, being from her home country, is not like other tape recorders I have seen, and it employs cartridges that are smaller than normal, and they seem not to be rectangularly shaped, though I cannot say how they are shaped exactly, since she, perhaps intentionally, perhaps not, makes them with her hand when she inserts them into or extracts them from the machine. This time, however, before beginning, she first presented me with a snack. "What's this?" I asked, taking it. It was roughly rectangular, and it was wrapped in a thin, crinkly brown paper. The paper was discolored and rendered transparent with grease. So the wrapper was greasy. "A snack," she claimed. Actually, since she herself didn't know our word snack, she used a word from her own language, a word that I didn't know, despite being, so I thought, conversant with said language. Then she made a gesture with her teeth and her fingers to suggest to me that I should eat it. Was it from her native land? I wondered aloud, so that means he asked her, was it from your home place? No, she claimed. She had gotten it from the bakery down the street.
Yet I went to the bakery down the street almost daily, and I'd never seen such a snack. I spread the paper wider, and I stared at it. I was not altogether sure that it looked edible. Would you like to share it with me? I asked her. But at this, she shook her head. No, it was for me. She couldn't possibly eat any of it. It was not polite. She was on a strict regime. What do you say here? Diet. But I must eat it. It was for me. Eat, she urged me, strangely urgent, strangely insistent. Perhaps I have explained enough to justify my reservations and why I did what I subsequently did. I tried to be as discreet as possible, breaking a piece off of the so-called snack and pretending to raise it to my lips, only to palm it, put it in his palm, and let it fall to the floor under my desk. I made a chewing motion, smacked my lips, expressed my appreciation of the snack. I thanked N. I repeated this procedure until the snack was dispersed, lying in pieces at my feet. So piece by piece, right? He's doing this and dropping it, and he's saying, oishi, tasty. And he's dropping the piece as he, okay? As I say, I try to be discreet. At the time, I thought I had been, since N proceeded with the interview as usual. But I suspect, from the fact that I have been asked to make this report, that I was not as discreet as I hoped. I swear I had no desire to cause an incident, international or otherwise. I hope that this report is enough to prevent my extradition. I beg the committee to reconsider. If it will help, I will agree to eat anything and everything presented to me in future. Now, I can see that there's a flatness to your eyes and your expressions. This is a kind of few things to say about this. What is this genre? Are you reading this as nonfiction or fiction? Do you think these stories are true? You're nodding the head. Do you think these stories are fiction? Do you think these stories are somewhere in between fiction and nonfiction? They're called reports. If I say, write a report, will you write fiction or nonfiction in this class? Because this is creative writing class. Where is the line, do you think, between fiction and nonfiction? Nobody's taking my Friday Japanese literature class in this class. If you were taking that class, you would be hearing from me about shishosetsu. Do you know what shishosetsu is? Or watashi shosetsu or watashi shosetsu. It's a kind of fiction where the writer writes about his or her own life, but puts fictitious elements in. You take something that happened to you, but you can twist it a bit, and make it kind of not 100%. But readers often, at the time, reading people, do you know Dazai Osamu, or Osamu Dazai in English, or Shiga Naoya Shiga? He wrote Anya Koro, A Dark Night's Passing. Dazai Osamu famous for Ningen Shikaku, No Longer Human, or Shayo, Setting Sun. In Setting Sun, Dazai writes as a woman, so it's obvious that it's fiction, because it's not him. And in Ningen Shikaku, he's writing as a man, but it's got the character writing as I. We talk about point of view, is writing from the name is not I Dazai Osamu, which is not his real name. It's Tsushima Shuji was his real name. So already he's writing with a pen name, but he's not writing as himself. He's writing as a character name. You get it? What I mean? So we know it's fiction in a way, but how many of the facts are like about Dazai? Many of them are. And people would know. He's like, I come back from Tsugaru, and I went to this resort with dare. You see how in these reports, Brian Evenson uses letters for names, people, K or N. He doesn't give the name. which seems to suggest that maybe it's a real person, but he doesn't want to give us the name because that would be rude, like to give away the person's name. Dazai does the same thing. You get the names of people like the Shiganaya does. Sometimes Dazai uses made-up names, but like Shiganaya often would use just like K or, T or something for the names. So there's some aspect, some degree of nonfiction that the story is based on something that happened to the author, but it's also could be fictionalized. So this is very funny, and like in parts here, you've got him saying, this is my report and I promise not to do this again. Maybe this is going to create like a problem for me internationally, or something. So this kind of thing. So there's a bit of irony here and humor and fiction. And most of you nodded, you think it's fiction. But some of this could be based on fact, right? Okay. So let me read another one or two. They're quite short, right? And we're going to kind of write our own reports for next week. Are you ready? This is very different. A report on toes. This is only the author and himself and his toes and his fingers. There's no, how can I say, other characters in this. Okay? Are you ready? Are you okay? A report on toes. If I sit with my legs crossed, my 15-month-old son, M, will sometimes unexpectedly bite my big toe. By the way, I know Brian Evenson, and I know his son, and I know his son's name, and it starts with M. Okay? But I'm not going to give the name. Okay? He does not do this hard enough to hurt me, but the look he sometimes flashes to me while doing it lets me know he knows he could hurt me if he wanted. So actually I said it was the author alone, but actually his son is in this. I forgot. Okay. So the son is like an infant, right? He's a baby at this time. Now, of course, this is many years before, and because I know Brian Evenson, I know his son and his son's age. He's older now, right? So this is, okay. I think this is like 2017, I think. I'll double check. This was published, the first volume, something like that. It's before COVID. Actually, there's some stories about COVID in here, though. So maybe I'm wrong. So see, I got to double check. Or maybe the second volume was after COVID and the first was not. See how confused I am. Okay, so his son M is biting his big toe as an infant. English is curious in that it has a specific singular word for the thumb. We call it a thumb, right? But none for the big toe. Thumb is evocative. It's a word that sounds like it's being said around the shape of a thumb lodged in the mouth, right? Like we put a thumb in the mouth as a baby. Big toe is simply descriptive. As if the namer of parts of the body was tired by the time his gaze fell that low, right? So you say thumb, but by the time you look down, you're too tired to say, give it a new name. It's just big toe. Okay? Big toe says, look at the toes, find the biggest one. There it is. There you have it. You've arrived. There's nothing more to be said. When it comes to toes, however, Spanish is worse. Anyone speak Spanish? Anyone studying Spanish? No? Yes. Okay. Maybe you'll know the word then. What's toe in Spanish? Do you know? No? Okay. You're going to learn it. And if I pronounce it wrong, sorry. You can maybe fix it. So, not only does the language not have a word for the big toe, it doesn't have a specific word for toes. Nihongo no bai mo ne, we'll talk about that later, right? If you don't know which you're talking about, you can say de mano, of hand, right? The fingers, right? De mano. Or de pie, is that right? De pie? De pie, is that right? Of the feet. In English, we have the word limb, right? Like ude in Japanese is a limb, right? Like an arm or a leg. So limb can refer to arms or legs, right? In English. Like in Japanese, if we say ude or something. But then we have, well, I guess ude and ashi, actually. Though ashi, see, let's talk about the language. Ashi in Japanese could be leg, could be foot. Chigaimasu? But in English, we say leg and foot. Those are different words. So you see how languages have different words for arms, legs, toes, feet, fingers, hands. So English is more specific than Spanish, and also actually Japanese is also vague, huh? Right? Because like yubi, but then ashi no yubi, janai? So isn't it? Right? So we say fingers and foot fingers, right? If you do chokuyaku. So actually Spanish is also different. So he's talking about the difference of language in English and Spanish. So in Spanish, right, dedos, I guess if fingers, and then de mano of hand or de pie of foot. Now, it's kind of like Japanese actually, right? The hand fingers and the foot fingers. So in English, we have the word limb, which is arms or legs, or it could be tree branch, the limb of a tree. 結構言語ねの話だからね興味深いかと because this is a language school, right? So, or it could refer to certain tree branches for that matter. We say a limb of a tree, but we also have the word arm and the word leg, right? And ude ashi in Japanese also has arm and leg. If we only had the word limb, we'd have to say limbs with toes on the end. Limb with a toe. Limb with a toe on the end. Or limbs with fingers on the end. Limb with the fingers. You see? But we have hand and foot. Or limbs with branches on the end, because limb of a tree is a branch. But if we were Spanish, we'd have to say limbs with digits of feet at the end. Digit is like, this is a digit. Fingers are digits, toes are digits in English. Also, digit means number, right? You see how language is so strange. So if we're Spanish, limbs with digits of feet on the end, and limbs with digits of hands on the end, okay? Which sounds crazy in English. We don't say this way. I don't know what we'd have to say for tree limbs. Probably just that tree limb, just that, right? Just we'd say tree limbs. We have no other way to say. In any case, it would be sufficiently exhausting. We'd be so tired by trying to make these language things that in the end, we'd stop talking about our limbs in the same way that I assume Spanish-speaking people avoid speaking about their fingers or toes. It's just not worth the effort. Okay. I think this is difficult for some of you, or you're just tired or hungry. Let me see how much time we have. We still have time. All right. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to do one or two more. Let me do one from the second volume. Maybe I can do one from the COVID days, because that would be maybe interesting. Here it is, further reports. Oops. That's 全然関係ない. Okay. I think if I plug this in, it has a different way of reacting. Okay. Oh, what happened? Oh, I'm at the end because I had read the whole thing. All right. I try to find one that hands. Well, we just did toes. Shall we do hands? We just did a report on toes. The second volume has a report on hands, but it's totally different. Okay, let's do a report on hands. Are you ready? F, because he was not good at hypnotism. You know what hypnotism is? To make somebody hypnotized. Like they come under your power, your control, like magic. So F, because he was not good at hypnotism, eventually decided hypnotism was not essential to his method. Instead, he would place his palm on his patient's forehead, like this, regard them intently, and say, "You will remember." The touch of his hand, activated by the resonance of his voice, by his gaze, the way he's looking at the person, would draw the hidden memory out of the skull. You will remember. You will remember. You will remember. The religion I grew up in has a similar technique for healing the sick, but it involves two hands. The patient, though patient is not the right word exactly, is seated facing away, so the back is to the person. The hands are placed on the head from behind, fingers splayed, as if to form a helmet. So you would hold, right, the person sitting with the back, and you would hold the head with the hands. The head is anointed with oil, a sacred formula is uttered, and the patient is either healed or remains ill. This is the healing ceremony of the religion. He was a Mormon. Do you know what Mormon? It's a kind of form of Christianity, and he left the Mormon church. Actually, there's a whole story behind that, which I'll tell after I read this, okay? Because it's interesting. So he's talking about his religion and the Mormon religion. I have uttered this formula myself. Willing power and healing from my hands into someone else's body through the application of hands to a head. While it was happening, I believed I was truly doing this and that the person whose head I touched would be returned to health. So he believed his religion told him, when you do this, it's going to heal the person, okay? Indeed, they were so invariably that even now, as an excommunicant, which means he left the Mormon religion and church and got out, to think of it still gives me pause. Even now, 15 years after being excommunicated, which means, again, he was actually excommunicated means they, communication, excommunication, they pushed him out and he left actually. Even 15 years later, whenever someone close to me is seriously ill, I wonder, could I do it still? Even though I no longer believe, would it be enough if through the pressure of my hands, the resonance of my voice, I could make them believe that they could heal themselves? F went on to develop an entire discipline based on losing his faith in hypnotism. Soon, he did not even need to touch the patient. It was enough simply to speak and to listen. There he is, engaged in his magical act of forcing buried memory to the surface. You will remember. You will remember. It surges up, here a bloody head, there another white shape, threatening to disappear just as suddenly. And yet he brings his words to bear in a way that cracks the memory open. And we do remember, we do. But whether he heals us or we heal ourselves, well, that is another story. And so I think I've read enough of these for you. Maybe you seem not quite, some of you are hearing and listening and taking it in, but they might be a little bit difficult. But I have a story to tell that will explain this a bit. So it's the last thing. I'll tell a story about this story because I know Brian Evenson and I know his history that will make it more understandable and interesting. Well, one thing is that he was, as I mentioned, part of the Mormon church. He was teaching at a university, which was a Mormon kind of run school. And he was also writing his first collection of short stories called Altman's Tongue. And it's, I told you he writes some horror and some, we read the kind of science fiction story. He writes in many genres. His first collection had some really violent scenes in it, but it was a kind of horror, but it's a kind of philosophical, and it had a purpose and a meaning behind. Anyway, that was his artistic right, he felt, to write those stories that way. It's, it's fiction. And he published it, and he got in trouble with people in the school, at the school, because they thought it was not moral to publish something with that violence in it. And he said, but look at it for what it is, and look at what it's saying about violence, which is that it was anti-violence in a sense. Or, you know what I'm saying? There was a message behind it, and he was doing this as an artist, as a writer. And so that incident, he got in trouble, because my understanding, he was tenured there, he was teaching there, and they gave him trouble at his job, and they wanted him to not, publish that book or have that book, be made public. And he said, no, it's my freedom as an artist to do this. And he kind of lost, you could say he lost his faith in the whole thing. And then he was excommunicated and he left the Mormon church, he left the school, he quit and he went and taught at other universities. Maybe I would never have studied with him at Brown many years later if he were still there, right? That university is called Brigham Young. I can say the name because he wrote about it publicly. And he wrote a novel called The Open Curtain, which was about his experience there. Now here again, The Open Curtain is a fiction novel. It's fiction. But he couldn't have written it unless he had those experiences, because that got him writing about the Mormon church and researching some of the rituals that he didn't even know about, some of the really secret ones, and putting that into the fiction and making it into a fiction, but it's about his experience. So this story, one other thing I happen to know about him is that he was very ill, and actually he tells that story in this volume, or maybe it was the first. Again, I have to check the dates and everything and get all that straight because I just read them. And but actually, after I studied with him at Brown, I had come to Japan and we had COVID and all these things, and I was still in touch with him on social media, and he got very ill. He had, I think, an appendicitis. The appendix had to be removed. He had a procedure, surgery. And it seemed fine, he was fine, he healed. But then like 6 months or 8 months later, later that year, he got very sick. He's traveling a lot. He writes and he just talks and he teaches and he does all kinds of things. Very busy, always busy, this guy. And he just got very ill. Actually, that story is in this collection. And what it was is that when they did the surgery, there was a little piece of something, maybe a piece of the, when the surgeon, there was a little piece of infected something, and that spread to, actually, maybe that was, he was telling in the interview. It's not it was in the interview he talks about this. And it spread to his lungs somehow. And he got very sick. And like he was having fevers and, just really sick. He couldn't eat and stuff. And one thing I remember him writing about or saying that wasn't in the book or in this collection and wasn't in the interview is at one day he had like blood coming from his head. That sounds like a horror story, and he writes horror stories. So, and he was like, he touched and he had like, so in this where he says, remember about the blood and remember about the sickness. Can we heal ourselves? Can we heal other people? You see the irony, he's writing about himself here. Do you see? Because he was very sick. So he's remembering his time in the church, learning this healing technique that he then didn't believe anymore after he left. And thinking about, could I do it now just by not touching, but just by my voice and my convincing or convince people they can heal themselves or I can heal myself. And he was very sick that time, so he has the memories come back. This is my interpretation, my kaishaku of this story, because I know that about him. So you see how it's fiction and nonfiction blended somehow. Do you feel that? Right? It reads like fiction. It sounds like fiction. It's a bit philosophical, or it's a bit funny, or it's a bit, right? Giving a message, or written sometimes from taking a step back, right? Not like, I did this, and I went to the store, and I bought this, and did. That's a straight nonfiction, huh? But this feels like fiction, too. Like shishosetsu. You can put yourself outside of it, but you can also talk about something that happened to you, or something you thought about. And it could be talking about toes and fingers and language, right? But that's your thoughts, your ideas about something. Or it could be a story like someone gave me the snack and, I ate it. But of course, he seems to be making that fiction too, but maybe that's based on something. Maybe he didn't really drop it under his desk. We don't know. That's a very funny way. But maybe he kind of, tried to eat and try to hide. He doesn't want to eat it. So we can take something that happened or something we're thinking about, right? Like thinking about the language of toes and hands and feet or something, and turn it into something between fiction and nonfiction, right? It's true, it happened, or it's our thought, but we can also take a distance and make it somewhere in between. And we can make the reader question, is this fiction or nonfiction? I teach sometimes, not this semester, last semester, a book by Paul Auster, an author I'm teaching on Mondays. his fiction again, his novel or his trilogy. And on Mondays, yesterday, I taught that period too. Every year I teach that in the fall. But in the spring, I also teach another book he wrote called The Red Notebook, which is kind of like these reports in Paul Auster style, where he's writing true stories, but somehow something feels unbelievable. Like students say, no, that couldn't happen. It's too guzen, it's too strange, it's too whatever. And so we talk about, where is the line? Where do you think if he's changing something, it's making it fiction or it's nonfiction, right? What do you believe? What don't you believe? And students will discuss. So I asked you, many of you said you think it's fiction. But if you talk to Brian Evenson, he would say, no, that really happened. Or, but it's the way that you write it too, that you can make it like fiction, even if it really happened. But, did we talk Rashomon effect this class? I think I shared in my, I have one student here is taking my period 5 American literature class. I talked a little bit about that Rashomon effect, and I talk about that in my Japanese literature class, which is that we can't objectively understand and explain things always, right? We have our own perspective and our own way. So nothing is really nonfiction. Even news we watch could be from some, right, perspective. Shiten, makankaku shiten, right? We all have. So what's fiction, what's not? So the reports are something like this. And I thought I would share these because I just read them recently. And I'm going to be talking to Brian soon on Zoom again. And it just seemed like a great thing because we read his story, and this is so different, from that story, right? About the marsh and the woman who might be the mother, kind of, right? The human mother who dies, and he realized she's not my mother because I'm not like her. I will never die. I'm never young and I'm never old, and I don't want to remember things, so I won't put the memory chip in. But do you see? This is the same person wrote that story about memory and about, right? These things. So isn't it quite interesting? So we can see that there's a human in every author. Even when we study Melville or these kind of classic authors that have, long ago gone, they were people. And they have thoughts and ideas, and that's how this great literature is created. I'm sorry to say, I have to say this now. That's why we have to be, I think, careful with AI, because AI is like an alien. It's like Uchujin. Actually, this does connect because Brian's story is about this, How is AI and technology going to change humans? Isn't that what that story is about, in a way? How are we changing as humans? Are we going to become like robots, or are robots going to take over our lives eventually with AI and all this stuff? So, let's keep ourselves human somewhere in ourselves. What makes us human? What's important? About being human. Where's the emotion? These stories could not be written by AI. They're too funny. They're too subtle. They're too, there's something about these stories that are very human, I think. And I think that's important for us. And why? That's what creativity is, user creativity. So I'm going to turn the lights on. I think when I turn them off, everybody's sleepy. And also, we're going to have drill soon, and then we're going to have lunch, and you can write your report on lunch. Didn't we read a report on lunch? That was about chipatna. We don't have chipatna in Japan. So maybe if you go to Shokudo, or maybe if you go to somewhere to eat lunch, or maybe you have bento story, you can write your report on lunch. Maybe for next week, you should all write a report on lunch. Let's do that. Oh, that'd be good. Let's do a report on lunch for next week. Yeah, that'll be next week's assignment. I want a report on lunch. But you can make it fictionalized if you want. You can make it really crazy if you want. It doesn't have to be nonfiction. You could make aliens come out of your bento box if you want. It's okay, because this is creative writing. Okay? So I'm going to turn the lights on. Are you ready for the earthquake? Maybe I should bring my stuff, Do we have to pack our stuff up?
This is an earthquake early warning. Please prepare for strong tremors.
紧急地震速报，强震即将来袭。
身を守ってください。
落ち着いて行動してください。
This is a training broadcast, not an actual earthquake.
这是训练广播。揺れが収まるまで身を守ってください。
あ、いや、多分今しないといけないんじゃない？
行動してください。
違う？
This is a
Down under the desks, I think. 違う？
这是
是不是
训练广播。
収まるまでって言うから、まだ収まってないって意味じゃない？
훈련 방송입니다. 지진이 아닙니다.
Get down, get down. It's a very 強い地震ですよ。あ、大丈夫でした。はあ、よかった。みんなが無事でよかった。心配してました。Okay, so you all remember Brian Evenson? This story about the kind of AI robot, you know, science fiction with the marsh and the mom and the, you know, and the memory chip. I'm going to read some what are called reports, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think the genre is? In other words, do you think that this is fiction or nonfiction or something else? They're very short. I mean, like 1-2 pages, something. They're not very long. This morning I read some to a different class and got a certain reaction, and I'm reading different ones now, just to mix it up. These reports, there are 2 volumes. One is an older volume and one is a later, obviously, more recent volume, which the more recent volume has stories from like COVID days and stuff in, and this is earlier than COVID time. So I'll start with the earlier reports, and then I'll read some from the newer volume. This is a report on a diet. Kay and I are in the middle of a diet which balances food in a deft way and increases our metabolism, right, to make it go faster, to make us lose ridiculous amounts of weight, quickly as if by witchcraft. The diet also deprives the brain of sugar, which makes us feel like we are losing our minds, which means going crazy. Since we have done this diet once before, we know that we are not losing our minds, at least not permanently, that we will get our minds back eventually once the diet is over. Just as I know, too, that the buzzing sensation I feel in my arms and hands at all moments will also pass. Kay does not feel this sensation. She never has. And the first time we did this diet, she at first doubted that I felt what I claimed to feel. And then, once I had convinced her I did, she worried that there was something seriously wrong with me. Perhaps she doubted it because of the way I first described the sensation as being like having bees beneath my skin. Bzzz. Okay? It's a kind of buzzing. Later I described it as like being bitten by many tiny insects all at once. And indeed, as I lie here at night trying to sleep, I still feel that that was exactly what it felt like at the time. That is how it feels to me now as well. As if my body is being bitten by tiny insects, or as if bees have somehow gotten beneath my skin and they're dancing to teach other bees beneath my skin the way out of my suffering body to where they can find sugar. Okay, so the body doesn't have enough sugar from the diet, you got it. Eventually the diet will end, and then I will reintroduce sugar into my body, and the bees will fall still. But how I can explain the bees to Kay in a way that she accepts, I don't know. I don't know how to explain this. So instead, in the dark, I claim that there's a tingling sensation in my arms, though this is not quite right. She asks me, "Are you all right?" And I say, "I think so." And she asks, "Do I need to go to a doctor?" And I say, "No, I'll be okay." I say all this in a calm and reasonable voice, as if I really will be okay. Even though it's dark, I do not close my eyes, for I am afraid of what the bees will do to me once I fall asleep. Okay. This is kind of the reaction I expected. I'll try another one. I'm going to do 2 from this collection, 2 or 3, and then 2 or 3 from the second collection. We'll see how much time we have. All right? Do you understand what that is, right? The diet is making him feel crazy and he feels like there's something under his skin. A report on being followed. I'm going to ask you about the genre later, after I read a few. Or nonfiction fiction. 2 days ago, in the early afternoon, I began to suspect I was being followed. I did not want to turn around because I did not want the person who was perhaps following me to know that I knew that they were following me. Besides, at the time, I was following someone myself, as per my instructions. And I worried that if I turned around, the person I was following might take advantage of the lapse in my concentration, which is lapse is like a stop or time in between, to shake me. And so I continued walking, the back of my neck prickling, my breathing accelerating, speeding up slightly. This continued until the man I was following halted at a bus stop. He took a newspaper from under his arm and he began to read, unless he was only pretending to. Uncertain what to do, I stopped as well at the same bus stop, and I pretended to read the paper that I had been carrying with me ever since beginning to follow the man I was following. Are you confused? You should be confused. A moment later, another man, also carrying a newspaper, arrived at the bus stop and also pretended to read. Unless he was actually reading, it was difficult to say. Was he the man that I had sensed following me? I had no way of knowing for certain. Perhaps the man who I had been following suspected he was being followed as well and was wondering the same thing about me. Right? Am I following him? Is he following me? Confused? All three of us stood in a row, waiting for the bus. What would happen, I wondered, if instead of getting on a bus, in the order we had arrived at the bus stop, we got on a different order? What if the man who was following me got on first, and then me, and then the man that I had been following? If that was the case, then who would be following whom? Junmon kaite ne? Thoughts such as these. Whoa, are you following me? No. Are you following me? Do you understand the meaning? ついてきてる? Okay. ちょっと冗談です。Okay. Thoughts such as these fill me with anxiety, but I cannot help but think them. In this case, after a while, the anxiety was so great I could not bear to even pretend to read the paper, and I folded it and I tucked it under my arm. The men to either side of me I saw had done the same with their papers. Okay. But when the bus arrived, we boarded it in the order that we had arrived at the stop. I climbed the steps, staring at the back of the man's head in front of me as he inserted his coins, feeling the eyes of the man behind me already boring into the back of my own head. Okay? And then I was at the box and depositing my own coins into the bus. The last coin slid in, ta-ting, and I started back, only to find everyone on the bus staring at me, unless they were staring at the man in front of me or the man behind. What? What? Huh? Okay. One more from this, and then I'll do from the second volume. I have some I want to read. A report on Brunch. Do you know what brunch is? You do. Some of you do. You know what lunch is, obviously. And actually this morning I read Evenson's report on lunch. And this comes later. This is a report on brunch. Brunch is between breakfast and lunch, right? So like, if it's like 11 a.m. or something, and you haven't eaten like at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. breakfast, and you're not planning to eat lunch until like later or eat like dinner or snack, it's brunch, okay? So that's what this is. My father, Shinamini, this has nothing to do with Brian Evenson or his fiction. This reminded me, if I were to write a report like these, I would write a report, maybe I will. So shiokana, I just had an idea. My father used to call this, he used to say blunch. Not brunch, but blunch. Now in Japanese, eru to aru ga muzakashii desho. Radirudedo. So in Japanese, sometimes R and L gets confused, right? Brunch is R, and lunch is L. わかりました？あ、よかった言って。ね、そこね、微妙でしょ。Right? You get confused with L and R. There's lunch, L-U-N-C-H, brunch, B-R-U-N-C-H as spelled. My father used to say blunch with L, like between breakfast and lunch. Instead of brunch, he used to call blunch. I don't know why. My father's kind of silly. So am I, right? So, like father, like son, right? Huh? Maybe. My dad and I are totally different, actually, but in some ways, maybe I have his humor. So, okay. This is a report on brunch, which is the usual way we say between breakfast, from breakfast and lunch. My father would make between breakfast and lunch. Okay. Neither K nor I, I'm getting hot. Could be, see, I'm talking. Neither K nor I could be described as fans of brunch. We do not, however, actively dislike it. Sometimes we can even be said to enjoy, quote, brunch, though admittedly, when, by circumstances beyond our control, we find ourselves at brunch, we tend to order foods that could more properly be described as lunch, right? So it's bimyo, right? When does it start and when does it end? When is breakfast? When is brunch? When is lunch? My previous partner, Jay, relished brunch. Relish means enjoy or loved or liked a lot. Okay, I relish it, I like it. It is no exaggeration to say that brunch was her favorite meal. Perhaps this was because it was not a meal you could get every day, but except in unusual circumstances, only on holidays or on the weekend. Brunch had for her a certain allure. It had a certain attraction. I, on the other hand, found brunch to be a confused and even a needy meal. Okay? Back when we were together, his ex-partner, every weekend, Jay would insist we go to brunch. I would resist this as long as possible. No thanks. Hoping to resist until lunchtime so that we could simply just go to lunch. But Jay usually got her way. When Jay and I used to go to brunch, she would order what she referred to as brunch-appropriate foods. Meanwhile, I would order what was, for all intents and purposes, lunch. It was as if we were at two different meals, as if there was a time zone being crossed from one side of the table to the other. Okay? Over time, this began to seem to be symptomatic of our relationship. It seemed to represent or be a symptom of our relationship as a whole. Even when we were at the same table, we were never at the same meal. Think about that. What a relief it is to no longer have to go to brunch. That's his ex-partner. And then Kay is the current. By the way, I know Brian, because he was, right? I worked with him and have been in touch. So I know who these people are with the letters. In this story, I have to tell you, I won't tell you the names, but I know that the names, the letters actually do match with that reality. But actually, so far we've read 3 together. Some of you hanging on, you're following me. Following? Are you following me? Are you following me? Are you following? Do you understand my joke? ちょっと親父ギャグっぽい。でも英語での親父ギャグ。Are you following me? ついてます？ついてきてる？でも Are you following me? Okay, so you got it. You're like, oh yeah, I got it already. It's not funny anymore. So, but I want to ask, right? So I've read 3, and I'm going to read some more. Do you think these are fiction or nonfiction, or does it depend on the report? So we had a report on brunch, and before that we had the report on, what is it, being followed? A report on being followed. And the first one I read today is report on a diet. Do you think a report on a diet is nonfiction? How many think it's nonfiction? Raise your hand. How many think it's fiction? Raise your hand. Okay, about half, maybe more think fiction. Okay. How about a report on being followed? How many think it's nonfiction? Oh, subarashi. How many think it's fiction? Yeah, I mean, this one has a stronger, to me, fiction feel, but hey, it's all the way we think about things, isn't it? And the last one, report on brunch. Nonfiction? Fiction. Keep in mind the first and the third have K in them, right? And the third has J. So these letters represent people, huh? But not giving the names. Okay, so yeah, we're going to talk more about like what is the difference between, right, fiction, nonfiction. I'm just going to open the other one up and I just turn that off to, all right? All right. Plug that in. And read a few more. This is from the second volume, and this is like after sort of COVID period. It's later. This was published more recently. Actually, Brianevenson did an interview that I saw on his social media, and I listened to it, and then I got really interested, and then I got the reports and read the reports, which I'm reading to you, sharing, and Brian and I are going to talk on Zoom about these, so it's kind of cool. All right, so a report on moving my jaw. Moving my jaw. For a long time, I went to bed late. I sleep less, so K tells me. Again, you see K is here in the second volume too, okay? Then I sleep less, so she tells me, K tells me, than a normal human. But if I try to go to bed at the same time as K, and to get the same number of hours of sleep as she does, I spend the first and last hours staring at the ceiling. I always used to claim I would go to bed earlier if I could figure out how to fall asleep. A month ago, I was listening to a so-called podcast, which told me, or purported to tell me, how snipers fell asleep. You know what a sniper is? Everyone's falling asleep. It's working. Look, amazing. No, I'm joking. You're not falling asleep. Some people are falling asleep. So maybe this is helping to... You know what sniper is? Like a assassin, right? With the guns. So they have to be like awake, right? To not get killed, but they have to sleep sometimes because they're human. How do they fall asleep? So he listened to a podcast. How do snipers fall asleep? They apparently simply relax their jaw. They let their bottom jaw fall loose, and then they misalign it. They let it slip slightly to one side. There were other techniques that snipers who want to fall asleep also use. But this jaw manipulation struck me as the most unusual technique, and thus the only one worth adopting. This technique only works if you sleep on your side, or at the very least you have to lean your head to the side, so that the bottom jaw has somewhere to comfortably misalign to. I am not currently a sniper. But despite that, I thought, why not? Okay, so actually, I'm going to have your creative writing assignment for next week is sleep like a sniper and then write about it. I'm joking. Oh, you got that? No, I'm not going to do that. It's crazy. Okay, you can try, but don't hurt yourself because then then teacher told me to sleep like a sniper. I hurt my jaw, So. 注意しない方がいいと思います。It's not over. I forgot it goes on. I got into bed. See, but that was a good place to pause, huh? And then give you assignment. Okay, let me read the rest. So he tries, right? Actually, could have ended there, huh? I kind of like that. But okay. I got into bed. I lay on my side, loosened my jaw, and I let it slip to one side. Almost immediately, I fell asleep. I slept deeper than I usually do. Did I wake up refreshed? No more so than usual, since I woke up 2 hours earlier than I normally do. So he fell asleep faster and then he woke up earlier. So he got the same amount of sleep. I had not spent an hour at the beginning of sleep staring at the ceiling and an hour at the end of sleep staring at the ceiling. But also I had not slept any longer than I normally do. Despite this, I now deploy, which means to use this technique every night. I relax my jaw, I let my bottom jaw slip, and then immediately fall asleep, dreaming of waiting in the trees, staring through a scope, waiting for someone to kill. Don't, Chewy, don't do this. You might have a bad dream. So. A sniper. Okay. You know I'm joking, right? You're not used to a teacher joking like this, right? I think that's, my students always like, huh? Can I laugh? Can I laugh? Yes, you can laugh. You don't have to though. Please don't laugh. Okay, I'll stop joking because it's not working. All right, I'll just read. A report on forbidden beverages. For many years, I did not drink beer, and then suddenly I did. Before that, before I drank beer, I drank wine. For many years when I was asked at a party, at a gathering, at an event, if I wanted something to drink, I would opt for wine, not beer. Before that, before I would accept wine, I drank nothing alcoholic at all. This was because I was raised not to drink. It was part of a religion that forbade it. Kinchi, right? But I outgrew that upbringing, and with it, that religion. And then I began to drink. Back when I drank only wine, I almost exclusively drank red wine. Though I would drink white wine if there was no red. I started drinking beer because I have a friend, F, who is a chef, and he is the co-owner, or she, of a brewery. Whenever we ate at his house, it's a he would offer beer pairings with each course. There were wine pairings as well, but perhaps because he was a co-owner of a brewery and because he was writing a book on beer pairings, I felt compelled to drink beer. Last year, F sold his stake in the brewery. He still sometimes drinks beer, but he drinks wine now as often as beer, perhaps more often. I can still drink wine, and sometimes I do, to be polite. But my tendency now, when I have a choice, is to drink beer. I shouldn't be talking about alcohol in class. Is this bad? I'm joking. Joke. So I used to prefer wine to beer, and now I prefer beer to wine. Why? I don't know. I simply used to crave wine, and now I crave beer. I do not crave coffee, no Starbucks. Coffee was also forbidden by the religion that I abandoned, along with wine and beer, but I've never craved coffee, though I sometimes drink coffee socially to be polite. I would rather drink coffee than explain to someone who offers it to me that I do not drink coffee. So just, okay, hi, and drink, but I don't like it. I used to drink beer as well to be polite, and now I crave it. Perhaps someday I will crave coffee, as I now crave beer. And yet, no matter how far I try to look into the future, I cannot imagine myself craving coffee. But to be honest, back when I craved wine, I couldn't imagine I would ever crave beer. Am I now the same person I was when I craved wine? Am I the same person I was when I did not drink at all? Will I be the same person if I start craving coffee? The answer is no. I've never been the same person, and I never will be. I've only ever been a series of persons who are vaguely related because they keep elbowing the person that came before them out of the skin they occupy in turn. Do you understand this? Changing, pushing the old self out and the new, right? Does it make sense? Yeah, okay. ちょっと難しい. Some are sober, some are drunk. Some crave one sort of drink, and some crave another. Yeah? More are only fractionally different, a little bit different from the person they elbowed out, but sometimes there is a decided break, like a total change. I do not understand the person I was when I refused to drink beer, nor do I understand the person I was before that, the person who did not drink at all. But if I am completely honest with myself, which I am inclined to be, since I have just had a few drinks, as he's writing this, he's telling us, I have to admit, I do not understand the person I am now either. How did I become a beer drinker? Where did this come from? I sometimes wonder, seeing the can in my hand. What stranger am I holding this beer for? And then I remember that I'm holding it for the stranger who is myself. And I take a sip from the can in my hand. Is this fiction or nonfiction? Or something else? Do you remember I asked that question? And you all laughed? Do you understand why I asked if it's fiction or nonfiction or something else? どうですか? How many think it's fiction? How many think it's nonfiction? How many think it's something else? Nobody is brave to say something else. Something else. Yeah, something in between. Something that has non-fiction element, fiction, non-fiction. Obviously, there's some truth in what is being written about, but like, I just had a drink and now I'm going to drink. Is he really drinking and writing it at that very moment and telling the reader? Or is this a technique to make us feel, right? We're creative writing. How do we write creatively? This is a type of creative writing, isn't it? It's nonfiction made fiction, fiction made nonfiction. Some of you raise your hands the first volume, the following, being chased. And some of you said nonfiction. A couple of you. Can I ask? Because I remember your hand went up because only one or two said nonfiction, actually. That's why. Why do you think that was nonfiction? It's a little space pause, but yeah. Can you give a reason?
Just feeling.
Just a feeling.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's fine. But most of you said it was fiction, right? Why is it fiction? Can someone tell me? Too ridiculous, too crazy, like the three people in a row and the staring. I mean, most of us, I think, typically would read and say it's fiction because it's surreal. It's something, right? Feels something. The way the three exactly at the same time putting the paper. Do you know what a doppelganger is? Doppelganger. Doppelganger. Genga, kana. It comes from German, actually. It's not English, right? So it's a double. And usually the double is like, looks like you, acts like you, but try to trick you or, yeah. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a story called William Wilson about a double. And I teach Paul Auster's New York Trilogy on Monday mornings, second period. And there's a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's William Wilson, and there's a double in the story. There are a lot of double kind of images. So that's used in fiction. It's a metaphor, right? Like a mirror image of oneself or something. And it's used in a dramatic way. This has not only a double, but a triplicate, right? There's a person he's following and a person following him, or maybe just paranoia. Now, if it's just paranoia, and in his mind, it could be nonfiction in a way. It could be he's paranoid and writing about his paranoia, but he's writing in a way that feels like fiction because it feels like a narrator in a story and it feels like a little bit crazy or something strange. But we know maybe Brian Evenson, I know him actually, he doesn't, not crazy guy. I mean, he's a very nice guy and a very funny guy. So we say maybe it's fiction, right? But maybe it's both in a way. But so that makes it something else, doesn't it? Right? It's not nonfiction or fiction. It's kind of both. It's some combination. That story is obvious. Some of the other stories maybe feel more like nonfiction. Like I have trouble sleeping staring at the ceiling. But then when he tells us, I'm dreaming of being a sniper, we laugh and say, that's not, right? So we can do all kinds of things as writers with nonfiction, so-called, and make it fiction. We can also take fiction and throw in something that we experienced or are thinking about. This morning I read about toes and hands, and it's a kind of thought piece about language. Like in Spanish, it's, what is it? Anyone speak Spanish? No? What is the hand? Fingers. Yeah, what is it? Mano. Okay, yeah, and deなんとかこう手と足プラスこれつけてwe get the fingers and the toes. Anyway, yeah, the pie was feet. I remember P-I-E, like spelled like pie, and the hands. Anyway, manos. Yeah, that's the hand. I think is manos actually, and then the fingers, right? Starts with a D. And so you have the fingers on the hand and the fingers on the feet. Japanese like this, right? So anyway, he wrote a piece like this, right? だから手の指と足の指じゃない? Then when we say finger and toes, it's a different word. So this is a thought piece, but it's nonfiction, but it's kind of the way it's written is like, feels like a thought piece rather than just telling a story. I went to the konbini and there was this crazy lady there with, I don't know, a crazy man there with red shirt and ponytail, and he was buying Irohas water, but he couldn't pay with his card because he lost it, and it was just really weird. Okay, something like this, because I lost my my card the other day. I have to pay for it by cash. I was like, okay, じゃあ現金で払いますすいません and like people waiting. Okay. So, you see, I could write a story about that, and I could make it funny, and I could make it a report. Actually, you're going to write a report. Surprise! Next week, you're going to write a report. Like, these are reports. Not a report like repo, like report, like you have to write for your essay class. So you mean, creative report using nonfiction, fiction. Let me check the time. I might read more, or I might not. It's 47. We have till 10. We have a bit more time. Let me read one or two more, and then finish, okay? But you're going to write a report for next time. Yes, I wanted to write this. Okay, maybe at least one or two more. A report on painting. Does anyone paint? Does anyone paint houses? Oh, you paint? Like, oh, really? Okay, cool. Actually, this is about painting like the house. It's not about painting paintings, but that's cool, yeah. So there's artists here. That's good. Because, creativity, right? Like the connections between things. If you do painting, anyone do music? Anyone play instrument? And you also, you're a really creative person. Yes, you understand, right? Because creative writing, creative painting, music, cooking can be creative. But creative arts all connected. So anyway, but this is not actually about painting. I forgot because it's actually about painting. You'll see. But yeah, so we can connect those things. A report on painting. It's not about Picasso. But for 12 years, I owned a house in P. I know where this is, but I won't say. Though I never cared much for P as a city. I didn't like the city of P. I'll tell you it's in America, but I won't say where. But I did vaguely care for the house, at least to some degree. Though it's also true that I hardly miss it either. So I like the house, but now I don't miss it so much. So it's after he moved out. I painted the interior of the house, as he's painting house, 4 times in the 12 years that he lived there, which seems like a ridiculously high number. I did not paint the entire interior each time, but I repainted a good portion of the house all 4 times. I painted first when I bought the house and moved in as a way, I suppose, of making the house mine. I covered the paint that was already there with a coat of paint of a slightly different shade, and then another coat, and then an additional coat, until I judged the paint beneath to be completely invisible. Has anyone, I asked about painting, so you paint like pictures, right, or canvas, I think is your meaning. Has anyone painted a room before? Have you done? Actually, has anyone painted like a room? You have to do, I don't know about painting if you're doing aburae, or it depends on the kind of painting too, but I think painting you do. But when you paint like a wall, you have to do layers, right? Like if you paint it once with those roll brushes, I've done before in America, a long time ago. You right? And you let it dry and it smells really bad, and I have asthma and it made me really sick. But, but then you let it dry a little bit, and then once it dries, you do a second, because otherwise too thin, right? You understand, right? The concept. Because actually when you paint, you use gesso or things, right? You have to do layer to paint on, correct? Right? I'm not a painter, but I understand that. I wrote a, oh my gosh, this has nothing to do with anything, but I wrote a short story, actually a novelette. It's like a long short story about a painter once. And so I researched a little bit about painters, even though I don't paint like canvas. My brother's a painter. And my ex-wife's father was a painter. Like he painted huge canvases. And my brother, yeah, I'm telling you a little personal. See my reports. I'm giving you my report. Because just we're talking about this. My brother is in the US still. He's 4 years younger, and he paints, and he does irezumi tattooing. That's how he makes money. Like he works, he does for people in America, okay? And, but he paints and he does animation. He's also very creative. He plays bass. And yeah, and I do, right? Like my family tends to be kind of creative people. So my brother paints, and what do we call him? Ex-otosan? That's a really strange way to say. Ex-giri no otosan toka nanka wakannai kedo. He was a painter too, and he was actually, I'll tell you this little bit. It was in the countryside of Japan. That's all I'll say. I won't say the place. I can say Tottori Ken. And he had atelier, and he had these huge canvases up there, and he would paint, and every year he would do a really big one, and then he would do some smaller ones, and he would have exhibits, okay? So I got to also see him at work, and he actually painted me a couple times. This is a long time ago. Like many years ago, did I have short hair? No, I had long hair. I had longer hair than now. Maybe. I don't even remember, because I think I was pulling, kind of like today. That's weird. I pulled my hair back today, but there's one painting he did of me, like my hair is tied back, like now almost, so I kind of saw him at work in his atelier. I don't speak French. Well, so I got the idea to write a story about a painter. And I wrote this novelette about a painter who kind of goes crazy in the story. It's fiction. He's painting for a client, like someone hired him to do a painting, and he's painting this woman, or and like he has like delusions and kind of hallucinating, and kind of goes. It's kind of a story about this painter going a little bit crazy, and it's metaphorical. And that, when I was at Brown University, here are how all these connections, studying with Brian Evenson. You see these weird associations. I wasn't planning on telling this story. That story, when I was a student at Brown, as a graduate student, won an award for the John Hawkes, what's called the John Hawkes Award for fiction. The only story I think I ever won an award for, because I don't submit to contests much, but because I was at the university, I decided to submit. And I got the award for that story about a painter. And so I had to study about how to do. So what I'm telling you all has nothing to do with my story, my brother's a painter, my ex-otosan. I like that. Ex-otosan. I'm going to write a report about that. My ex-otosan was a painter. And so I knew about painters because I was around painters, and I'm around creativity because I do music and I do other stuff in creative writing. So that reminded me. But yes, I also painted like a room in my lifetime. I've done a few times. My parents, we had a house and they wanted me to help. And then another weird story. I'm supposed to be reading Brian Evenson. I'm talking about myself, but I'll go back. But why am I talking about this too? Because you see how many stories you can make from your life. I could go write stories about this. I haven't thought about this in years, these things I'm telling you now. You see? But now I have ideas myself for stories. You see? Maybe I go write a story after this class. Well, I have to teach again, but tonight or tomorrow or sometime, you see? You can get ideas from stories from your life, and you can make into fiction, like I did with the painter's story. Tamatama koyu hanashi ga dete kimashita ne. Because I did a story about a painter, and it won an award. That's also tamatama at Brown, which is with Brian Evenson was there. He didn't judge the contest, but he was my advisor that time. You can take those ideas. So you have to do layers, or it's too weak, right? Just like you have to do gesso, which reminded me of my story, because I was writing about how he's like layering canvas with gesso, which I learned about from Otosan, and also my brother paints, ex-Otosan, and also my brother paints. He does abura-e too. So I've seen him at work. He has a house, and he has a room in his house. I live in a shoebox in Tokyo, but my brother has a house with a big room and extra room for painting. So that's why I can't be a painter, because I have no place to do, It's right, you need a studio. You need some place to do, unless you do small ones. You can do small ones anywhere. Okay, a report on painting. Are you all asleep now? You're like, oh my God. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I'm going to read this. It's short, I think. No, it's not. It's pretty long. It's not that long. It's 3 pages. These are all pretty short. Okay, we have, perfect. This is the last one, I promise. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it again. For 12 years I owned a house in P, we read that part. Okay, I painted the interior 4 times, right? And each time, he says, I repainted a good portion of the house, all 4 times. I painted first when I bought the house and I moved in a way, as a way, I suppose, of making the house mine. I covered the paint that was already there with a coat of paint of a slightly different shade, and then another coat, and then another coat. That's what he's talking about. You have to layer it. That's what he's talking about. Okay, now I continue. All right? Until I judged, I thought the paint beneath was invisible, right? So you paint a different color, you got to do 3 or maybe even 4 layers. So the pink becomes something else. 8 years later, shortly after a lung collapse and a severe infection that nearly killed me, this is true. I remember when he got sick. It was after I was at Brown. I was living in Japan that time in Fukuoka. I painted again, and I was in incredible pain. Fevered, clammy, which is cold, somewhat delirious, a little bit, out of it because he was sick. I had been in the hospital for 3 weeks, and I had lost 22% of my body weight. Okay? But I insisted on painting, perhaps hoping to see it as a new beginning. My ex-girlfriend, Jay, the one they went to brunch together in the last volume, okay? Still barely my girlfriend at the time. We would break up a few weeks later, okay? This was after when he was sick, which, okay, tried half-heartedly to stop me. Oh, don't paint, you're sick. Half-heartedly is like shoot the hump, but not really fully, okay? But she said you shouldn't paint. A month after that, in a misplaced act of guilt, maybe, or altruism, I moved out of the house and into an apartment, leaving Jay to live in the house I had just repainted. So they broke up, he left. I painted again a year and a half after that, when Jay moved out, and I bought a house with a former friend of mine, also called Jay, but, right, male, female, or female, male. I moved back in, bringing Kay, whom I would marry later, with me. Does it make sense? Okay. The 4th time came a few years later as Kay and I prepared to leave P, the place, for good. The realtor, this is like Fudo-san, told us we needed to repaint everything in white and light colors. It would help us to sell the house. So now I have to paint again. Did it help to sell the house? In any case, the house sold. It's true that when Kay and I moved here to V, we didn't buy a certain house, largely because of the paint. The interior walls had been deliberately painted to look like smoke-stained stucco, which is like this kind of like 3-dimensional, like plaster stuff. And they didn't like. We felt like we had stumbled into a badly conceived Mexican restaurant. So they didn't like the style of it. Could we live in such a place? No, we could not. Painting of this sort is like repression, which is pushing stuff down, emotions. You have something that you have experienced for years, and then suddenly, by your own volition, you cover it over. You see the metaphor he's using? It's like, right? You paint over it, you cover it up. Something you don't want to think about. It's still there. You still know it's there, but you no longer see it. You've covered it. Unlike repression, however, there's rarely a return of the repressed, at least if you paint it properly. You rough the walls, wash them, dry them before you begin. Paint layers, it doesn't come back. You can't see what's underneath. What have I repressed from my days in the house in P? A lot, no doubt. Does it ever rise up? Yes. Occasionally, but always in a way that makes me think of an old and ailing pet. Each time, it seems more and more a mercy to simply put the animal down, which means it's like if the pet is sick and you go to the veterinarian and you say, owari ni suru? You don't want to do, but okay. When Kay and I moved here, we decided to paint again. We did not want to live with the previous owner's paint choices because we could not imagine them to be choices that we would have made. Okay? We did not want to feel like we were guests in someone else's life. We painted the interior of the house, but by the time we were ready to paint the final room, the converted attic, we were exhausted. We stopped. A year and a half later, that attic still has not been painted. In some sense, it belongs to an earlier house, as if we have not yet claimed it. the philosopher B, says of the attic, up near the roof of all our thoughts, up near the roof, all our thoughts are clear. I do find this in our converted attic, but still I see it as someone else's attic, not mine. In other words, someone's thoughts are clear there. Or rather, here, since that is where I'm writing this. Again, he's doing like with the beer. But it's difficult to say exactly whose. Okay, I'll stop there. Let me turn the lights on. Did you enjoy? Maybe you didn't enjoy as much as the AI story. Maybe that was easier to the fiction, because this is something else, huh? Isn't it something else? Have you read nonfiction like this before? Maybe. Does anyone know Shishosetsu? Does anyone like Shishosetsu? Does anyone like Dazai-osamu here? Yeah? Anyone else? Anyone read Dazai-osamu? No? No. Just one? Anyone read Shiganai? I think Shiganai is difficult. Many people have a hard time with him. He's very dada-dada for people. But I like, he's dada-dada, but I think he's really, it's beautiful and he's wonderful, but it's hard for students to read. Okay. What time is it? So for the morning, we read about lunch, and I had them report on lunch for next week. But we didn't read lunch. So I'm not going to have you report on brunch, because I don't think, does anyone eat brunch? あんまりでしょ? なんでそれをスキップして What shall we do? What shall I have you report on? Only one painter, so we can't have you report on painting. A report on chimney sweeps, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think anyone's a chimney sweeper. Anyone a chimney sweeper? Baito, chimney sweeper. No? We have to sweep chimney, otherwise Santa can't come for Christmas and we can't get presents. Do you understand? No. You don't understand my meaning. It's making jokes. Bad jokes. Ah! Shall we do a report on beverages? Ah, いいですね. Beverages are drinks. Don't write about alcohol. You can, but like, maybe I don't want to know if you're underage, right? I think. So you can't drink, I think. So don't write about alcohol. Okay, let's change. Let's not do that. We could do that, right? You could do about like the green, what's that green stuff that, or like the sweet one, or mochaccino, or I don't know, something, frappuccino. I don't know, what do you like to drink? Anyway, actually, you can do a report on anything. Really is the best, like just a report. Like make it nonfiction, but you can make it funny, you can make it sad, you can make it, whatever, you can write in any style. But take something. We kind of did early in the semester, like taking something, but you've read something in this style, but your own style, of course, but like influence, the eikyo to you ka, sanko ni, like think about. A report on moving my jaw. If you try, you can tell us what happened, dreaming with the jaw. A dream up, you could, right? Report on sleep, a report on food, a report on Chuo-sen being late again. Or I couldn't get in because it was so crowded. From Yotsuya Station last week, I couldn't get into the train. I could write a report on, actually, see, I'm getting all these ideas in my class, just talking to you. But that's, if you use your mind creatively, right, then you get ideas like this, and you just do. I hope for you that you can do this. Because, unfortunately, we're not using our own. We're flipping through what's on TikTok today, or what's on Twitter, or X, or X. Sorry, it's not Twitter, it's X, since Elon Musk bought it. Or whatever you use, Instagram, or whatever you use. But if you're using your creative brain, you can, it's kagiri naku, the sky's the limit, right? Like all these ideas just come out. Of course, my life's longer than yours. I have more because I'm older, right? Like my story's like from like 20 years ago something. Exotosan wa inai desho. I hope not. Please, I hope not. You have to be old for that, like me, and hopefully you never have that. But but it happens, huh? So X. Wow. It's really nice. Autumn leaves, mid-November. It's autumn in mid-November. And just raking leaves all the time, every day. I've been on campus last couple days, last week too, I think. Raking leaves, huh? There's no leaves anymore.